many other...
This is right, Arab.
Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett. There is lots going on around the world today and we will take you through some of the most interesting developing stories. First up, the headlines. An inquiry into the alleged sex abuse of minors by French Catholic priests finds over 330,000 victims of paedophilia from 1950 to 2020. A landmark report's been released after 2.5 years of investigation. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken holds potentially delicate talks in Paris to try and patch up ties with France, which is still angry over the cancellation of a submarine contract. Afghanistan is to start issuing passports to its citizens again after months of delays. Many Afghans remain stranded in the country after the Taliban takeover. China mounts the largest incursion yet near Taiwan as 56 Chinese warplanes cross into its air defense zone. Taiwan's president warns of catastrophic consequences if it falls to China. Facebook, along with Instagram and WhatsApp services, begin returning online after a massive and lengthy outage. The company says the cause was a faulty configuration change. Siakura Minabe, Klaus Hasselmann and Giorgio Parisi jointly win the 2021 Nobel Prize in Physics for demonstrating how increased levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere lead to increased temperatures at the surface of the Earth. We begin in France, where the Roman Catholic Church is being rocked by yet more damaging revelations. It's a growing scandal after an investigation into sexual abuse in the French Catholic Church found that over 300,000 children were victims of abuse at the hands of those linked to the church, including clergy, since 1950. Inquiry Chief Jean-Marc Sauvé says the French Catholic Church showed cruel indifference to victims. He says an estimated 3,000 child abusers, 2/3 of them priests, have worked in the church for over 70 years. Presenting the report, Sauvé said the abuse by the church was systematic and there were efforts to shield the clergy from paedophilia claims.
In the French population, over 18 years of age, 216,000, plus or minus. 50,000 is the 95% confidence interval. They were sexually assaulted by clerics, priests, or nuns as minors. If we now add to this number of 216,000 the victims of lay people in the church's mission, whether salaried or voluntary, for example in religious education, catechism or chaplaincies, in Catholic educational establishments or youth movements, the number of victims then rises from 216,000 to 330,000. More than 34% of abuses in the Catholic Church are thus committed by lay people.
It's claimed the church not only didn't take the necessary measures to prevent abuse, but also turned a blind eye, failing to report it and sometimes knowingly put children in touch with predators. The Commission says the church showed complete indifference until the 2000s and only started to really change its attitude in 2015 to 2016.
Mais il y a eu surtout
Above all, there was a series of neglects, failures, silence, and institutional cover-up. They all had a systemic character, and on this subject, the Commission deliberated at length and came to a unanimous conclusion. The Church did not know how to see, did not know how to hear, and did not know how to pick up the weak signals.
Et elle est parvenue à une conclusion unanime.
The probe was carried out by a commission which was established by Catholic bishops in France in 2018 to shed light on abuses and to restore public confidence in the Church. The 2,500-page landmark report was released after 2.5 years of investigation. It follows widespread outrage over a string of paedophilia claims and prosecutions against Church officials worldwide.
It's a report about the systemic phenomenon of pedocriminals in the ranks of the Catholic Church. The number of 3,000 means that all the bishops knew about it, almost all of them. 3,000. It means that generations of aggressors were allowed to carry on with it. And if we put it in relation with the figure of 216,000, which is the number of victims, that is devastating. Because the ratio between 216,000 and 3,000, it's one aggressor for 70 victims. That is terrifying for the French society, for the Catholic Church.
A hotline launched at the beginning of the probe received 6,500 calls from alleged victims or people who said they knew a victim. The inquiry chief says 22 alleged crimes that can still be pursued have been forwarded to prosecutors. Over 40 cases that are too old to be prosecuted but involve alleged perpetrators who are still alive have been forwarded to church officials.
Reparations must be made. As far as possible, the harm done must be repaired, which implies that at least for offences that are statute barred, recognition of the status of the victims.
Well, the French Church has expressed shame and horror over the abuse. A representative of French Catholic bishops has asked victims of sexual abuse for forgiveness. The head of the French Conference of Bishops said he and his fellow bishops wanted to express to victims their shame at the abuse revealed in the report. The world had a little reminder yesterday of what life was like before social media apps consumed our time and energy. Services of social media apps Facebook, WhatsApp and Instagram were disrupted worldwide for almost 6 hours. The outage prevented the company's 3.5 billion users from accessing social media and messaging services. It even led in some cases to people holding conversations with each other in person. Down Detector, a site which tracks outages, said it was the largest failure it had ever seen, with 10.6 million problems reported around the world. Facebook says it believes the root cause of the outage was a faulty configuration change and insists there's no evidence that user data was compromised. As tech share prices fell, Mark Zuckerberg's personal wealth dropped by nearly $7 billion at one stage. The outage also became comedic ammunition for competitors, with several other tech companies like Twitter, Google, Reddit poking fun at the social media giant's predicament.
Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp lit up again after a nearly 6-hour outage on Monday. Facebook apologised and initially could not say what caused the failure. But the company later said the problem was a faulty configuration change. CEO Mark Zuckerberg posted on Facebook, quote, "Sorry for the disruption today. I know how much you rely on our services to stay connected with the people you care about." The outage was the second blow in days to the social media giant. On Sunday, a whistleblower accused the company of prioritising profit over clamping down on hate speech and misinformation. Shares fell nearly 5% for Facebook, but later rose 0.5% in after-hours trade after the platforms rebooted. Several Facebook employees who declined to be named said that they believed that the outage was caused by an internal mistake in how internet traffic is routed to its systems. Facebook lost about $545,000 in US ad revenue per hour during the outage. That's according to ad measurement firm Standard Media Index. Security experts said an unintentional mistake or sabotage by an insider were both plausible.
The Islamic State terror group has claimed responsibility for a deadly blast near a Kabul mosque in Afghanistan. This just hours after the Taliban said they had destroyed an IS sleeper cell in the Afghan capital. Taliban fighters launched a massive operation in Kharizmir vicinity of Kabul. The operation went on for 9 hours, with loud explosion-like sounds being heard in the area. Gunfire was heard as well until 4 a.m. in the morning local time. 3 IS members are understood to have been killed, but during the operation 4 Taliban fighters also died. On the 3rd of October, a bomb blast rocked the Eidgah Mosque in Kabul, killing at least 12 people and injuring over 30 others. Among those killed were 7 Taliban members. Kabul's Eidgah Mosque was packed with Taliban officials who were attending a memorial ceremony for the mother of Deputy Minister of Media, Zabiullah. WION correspondent Anas Malik visited the blast site.
I'm standing outside the Eidgah Mosque, which is the second biggest mosque in Kabul, and yesterday an explosion took place here at this very point. You can see that black spot. This is where the explosives were detonated. It's still unclear whether it was a suicide explosion or a VBID explosion. There is a police container which is there as well. You can see the windows being damaged, the glass that is damaged over there. Onto the outer wall of the Eidgah Mosque, you can see there are bullet holes that was done due to panic firing, and there are holes that are caused by ball bearings as well. That explains the intensity and the magnitude of the blast. 12 people were killed, 32 were injured. Now onto the main entrance of the masjid. You can see the wooden structure being damaged, but it does not have that great of a damage per se. The main gate from where the person had detonated their explosive, it is there, you can see, and from here it's a 200-meter walk to the courtyard where the prayers, the condolence prayers for Zabiullah Mujahid's mother, Taliban spokesperson, were ongoing at the point of blast. At the time of blast, 24 hours ago, we saw immense and intense security measures over here, but despite of that, there was a blast that had taken place. Anas Malik in Kabul, Afghanistan, for WION, World is One.
WION's Anas Malik reporting there. Well, the Taliban has seen a series of broad daylight attacks, and indeed the Islamic State group has been in conflict with the Taliban in Afghanistan since 2015. Hundreds of ISIS fighters were also freed along with Taliban members in the Bagram and Kabul prison breaks. The arms and ammunition left behind by Western troops as they withdrew has also helped ISIS. And now the Taliban ruling from Kabul's presidential palace faces growing challenges in governing a war-ravaged country while seeking international recognition. China has sent 56 warplanes into Taiwanese airspace in a record incursion. Taiwan has slammed Beijing and told the Chinese government to stop what it calls such irresponsible, provocative actions. Taiwan scrambled aircraft after 36 fighter jets, 12 H-6 nuclear-capable bombers and 4 other planes entered its southwest air defense identification zone. 4 more fighters entered the zone in a night sortie, bringing the total to 56 planes. Since Friday, China has sent 148 aircraft into Taiwan's defense zone. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen warned that if Taiwan were to fall, the consequences would be catastrophic for the region, and said it would signal that authoritarianism has the upper hand over democracy. Taiwan's Premier Su Seng-chang, meanwhile, said the population needs to be alert.
台湾一定要警觉，中国是越来越过分了。世界也都看到中国的一再侵害区域的和平，对台湾的压迫，所以民主阵营的国家都再提出警告。我们国人要自强， 我们也看到蔡总统一直支持国军，我们一定要增强自己，团结一起，增强国力。想要并吞台湾的国家才不敢轻易动武。
The Air Defence Identification Zone includes an area that overlaps with part of China's own Air Defence Identification Zone and includes some of the mainland. Taiwan identifies itself as a self-ruled democratic country, but lives under the constant threat of invasion by China. Beijing views the island as part of its territory and has vowed to one day seize it by force if necessary. In the last 2 years, Beijing has started sending large sorties into Taiwan's defence zone to signal dissatisfaction at key moments and to keep Taipei's ageing fighter fleet stressed. Meanwhile, China has accused Washington of being provocative after the US sold arms to Taipei and sent its warships to the Taiwan Strait. A Chinese spokesperson warned that the US should correct its mistakes and abide by the One China principle. Reacting to the incursions, Washington says it remains concerned about the situation and has reiterated the US will continue to assist Taiwan in maintaining self-defense capability.
Well, we remain concerned by the People's Republic of China's provocative military activity near Taiwan, which is destabilizing, risks miscalculations, and undermines a regional peace and stability. We urge Beijing to cease its military, diplomatic, and economic pressure and coercion against Taiwan, and we have an abiding interest in peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. That's why we will continue to assist Taiwan in maintaining a sufficient self-defense capability.
Israel has accused Iran of orchestrating an attempted attack against Israelis in Cyprus. Iran has swiftly denied that accusation. An armed individual has been arrested.
העולם לא מורכב רק מידידים. יש לנו אויבים והם לא נחים לרגע. איראן ממשיכה כל העת במאמציה לפגוע במדינת ישראל ובאזרחיה, גם בימים האחרונים, בפעולה שסוכלה בקפריסין. אנחנו פועלים בזירות רבות סביב השעון. במקביל, אנחנו גם דואגים להבטחת עליונותו המוחלטת של צה"ל ומוכנותו לאתגרים הגדולים שניצבים בפניו.
Initially, Israeli Cypriot billionaire Teddy Sagi was reportedly a target of these attacks, but media reports later said the suspect was an assassin who was targeting Israelis with business activities in Cyprus. Now, Israel later called the attack a terrorist incident directed by Iran. The Iranian embassy in Nicosia refuted the allegations, calling them baseless. According to media reports, the suspect was arrested on the 27th of September in Nicosia, just after crossing by car from a checkpoint linking the Turkish-controlled north and the southern parts of the divided island. He was found in possession of a pistol, ammunition and a silencer. He was widely reported as an Azeri holding a Russian passport aged in his late 30s. Iran and Israel have been engaged in a so-called shadow war, including several reported attacks on Israeli and Iranian ships over the summer that the two have blamed on each other. Iran has also accused Israel of assassinating scientists and sabotaging sites which are part of its nuclear program, which it claims is for civilian purposes only. Israel insists Iran is committed to developing nuclear weapons, while sowing wider unrest by supplying its armed drones to allied groups across the region. A Ugandan's mission to spread kung fu has been inspired by his love of Jet Li films. Kizet Sejemba took up the martial art and has trained with Chinese experts and has starred in Ugandan films. Sejemba is now passing on the martial art to a new generation.
Kizza Sejemba fell in love with Kung Fu while watching Jet Li movies as a teenager. Today, the 30-year-old Ugandan stars in action movies himself. And he's passing on the martial art to a new generation.
Yes.
Growing up in an informal settlement in Kampala, he says he had to learn at an early age how to ward off muggers.
I decided no, these girls, they need to get what they call self-defense so that they can at least fight for themselves.
Sajemba has been starring in films made by Wakaliwood, a Ugandan low-budget action film company, for over a decade.
How did you learn Kung Fu?
But in 2017, while shooting Bruce Yu, he travelled to China to train with Kung Fu experts. That was where his passion for teaching was fostered. He says an abbot taught him some techniques and told him to spread Kung Fu in Africa. So that's what Sajemba did. He opened a club in his backyard, training young people aged between 5 and 16. Many at the club in the central town of Nansana are girls, encouraged by their communities to gain self-defense skills. And one student is his 5-year-old daughter, Asfa Nakalija. She says she plans to use the techniques she's learnt to defend herself and fight off wrong people. Sajemba's classes are free of charge, but he says attendance has dropped off amid the global health crisis. Nevertheless, he has high hopes for his students.
What I need from Kung Fu here in Uganda, I need at least to get, even if one person can go and compete in Olympics, World Olympics, I think it will be very, very better for me. And I will never give up until Kung Fu reaches on top.
Kung Fu is not currently an Olympic sport, but promoters are fighting for its inclusion. And it is an event at the Youth Olympic Games.
William Shatner, best known as Captain Kirk in the original Star Trek television series, will be launched to the edge of space next week. Shatner will be part of a 4-member crew aboard Blue Origin's New Shepard launch vehicle. The launch is scheduled for October the 12th. The 90-year-old actor is also looking to shatter the record of the oldest person to reach space.
Reality has finally caught up with William Shatner. The actor, who famously portrayed Captain Kirk on the original Star Trek television series, is actually heading to space.
Wow. That's shocking, actually.
Thanks to one of the billionaires now offering trips to the final frontier. In Shatner's case, it's Jeff Bezos, whose next Blue Origin rocket launch on October 12th will have Shatner on board. In a statement, the actor, who also starred in 7 Star Trek films, said, quote, "I've heard about space for a long time now. I'm taking the opportunity to see it for myself. What a miracle." Shatner is flying as a guest of Blue Origin, but the company says it has also sold nearly $100 million in tickets to paying customers, though it has not said how many. Shatner will be joined by a former NASA engineer, a clinical research entrepreneur, and a Blue Origin vice president. The flight will be the company's second with humans. The first came in July when Bezos himself was among those who soared more than 66 miles above the Texas desert and returned safely to Earth. A round trip that, at a top speed of over 2,000 miles an hour, lasted under 11 minutes. 82-year-old aviation pioneer Wally Funk was also on that flight. Blue Origin at the time touted her as the oldest person to reach space. Shatner, at 90, is set to shatter that record.
And finally, the Italian town of Cremona, known as the birthplace of violin, is now home to a new centre of excellence where students can learn and study with the world's maestros. The Strafe Center opened this week and is entirely dedicated to stringed instruments.
This is Cremona, a small town in northern Italy that has been the center of the world's string instruments. Ever since Andrea Amati designed the first violin in the mid-1500s, the city has never lost its supremacy in this field. It is home to 140 workshops where artisans of all nationalities design and make instruments in the time-honored tradition.
Well, it all started back in the mid-1500s when Andrea Amati produced the first instruments that we know because he put a label inside the instrument, so that we know he existed, and there also are archival information. But he made the first, what we call true violin. And from there, his sons, and on through the generations from about 1550 to 1750, the very best instruments, the most beautiful and the acoustically most interesting instruments were made in Cremona.
The city will now be promoting excellence in string playing through the Strafe Center for Strings. The center has opened its doors to students.
So after 50 years from the creation of the Stauffer Foundation and 35 years from the creation of the Stauffer Academy, we are about to open the Stauffer Center for Strings, the very first international center entirely dedicated to strings. Here, students coming from Italy and all over the world will have the opportunity to learn from the most important international artists, soloists, professionals, and have a very unique experience of training.
Francesca Dego is one of Italy's best-known violinists. She's a graduate of the Stauffer Foundation.
This wonderful masterclass for concertmasters, for orchestral leaders, which is of course one of the top jobs in the industry, and very few teachers, very few students actually get to access a course and to meet face to face with so many different leaders from the top orchestra. So this, I think, is extraordinary. There will be workshops, there will be the possibility for especially international students coming here to meet other creative minds from Cremona, for instance.
Salvatore Cordo has been Italy's top violinist for decades.
It has an incredible characteristic, because I think it's the only academy at this level where there are incredible teachers, the only one that allow the students to study free of charge.
The Stauffer Foundation goes back 50 years. It was founded by a Swiss-Italian entrepreneur and has promoted music since then. It will also encourage research and study into production of violins as well as music. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And that's all we have on today's WION Live broadcast from London. I've been Ollie Barrett. Thanks very much indeed, as ever, for being with us. For more global news and updates, do stay tuned to WION World is One.
This is right, Arab.
One world.